Hey everyone, welcome back to bageltcg. Today we're going to be looking at the Draconic cards from Uprising as we continue our Uprising set review series for Classic Constructed. Before we get into that, I want to thank our sponsor, which is Whooped Wizard. If you use the affiliate link in the description, you support the channel and you get 5% on all box breaks. You can also support me through Patreon, where I will be uploading bonus videos that are kind of a laid-back continuation of these videos. More just discussing kind of anything and rambling, almost podcast style. But for now, we are going to hop into the review. So this is going to be just their Draconic cards. This one should be a little bit shorter because I don't think there's a ton of Draconic cards, maybe like a dozen or so. As always, we have our normal ratings, 1 through 5 stars. I've gone over these in the previous videos, so just to speed it up. These, I'm not going to go in depth about them, but these are the 5 different star ratings here. We're just going to start off. So first we have the legendary equipment piece. It is a chest piece here. It blocks for 2 and has temper, which is pretty good. Historically, blocking for 2 with temper is good enough for most armor pieces. It means it'll block for 3 total. People play Crater Fist and Guardian, and they don't even care about the effect. They just like that it blocks for 2 with temper. The effect is actually pretty solid as well, though. It says once per turn instant, you pay a resource and then you gain a resource for each red card in your pitch zone. You can only activate it if you played a red card this turn. So if you have a red card in your pitch and you played a red card this turn, when you pitch your second red card to this ability, you'll gain 2 resources. So it kind of makes 2 red cards pitch for 3 total, which is, I guess, is kind of nice. Gives you an extra resource there. So it'll get some value if you have a lot of reds in hand, giving you some extra resources. The Draconic decks are pretty red heavy, so I think they'll like this chest piece. I think you could still reasonably argue that Fyendal Spring Tunic is better sometimes. I don't know what times it'll be better. In the testing we've done so far, at least, this is really preliminary testing. So any kind of takes I'm making is a little preliminary here, right? The set's not even out yet. But we've been testing with proxies and stuff. My team, I've liked this a bit more in Dramai than I have in Fi. I liked Tunic a little bit more, but I think it's decent in both of them, and it's nice that it blocks well. So I'm going to give it 3 stars. I think it's very playable, and I think it'll certainly see play. I don't think it'll be core to the deck. I don't think it's 100% necessary, so I'm not going to give it 4 stars for core, but I will give it 3 stars for certainly playable. Next, continuing the cycle that Flesh and Blood has been doing, I really like how they do a common version in the same slot and then a legendary version. It's like that for basically everything. They've done this for the last few sets now. If there is a ice headpiece, there is also that's at common. There's also a legendary ice headpiece, and so on and so on. I really like that they do this. It's kind of cool that they have like a powered down common version and then a legendary version of everything. Anyways, though, we have Sash of Sandicai here. It just lets you at instant speed destroy it to gain a resource, and you can only activate that if you've played a red card this turn. It doesn't block. This is obviously for limited. In Classic Constructed, I don't think it's playable, so it's going to get 1 star. There's always going to be better options for your chest piece. I think it's a great card in limited, but for Classic Constructed purposes, I do not think this card is playable. Next, we've got Thaw. Thaw is a great card. This is our first Majestic here. It blocks for 2, it costs 2, and it's a red strip. It's an attack action that attacks for 6. And it has the effect of, while Thaw is in your graveyard at the start of your turn, you may banish it and choose 1. You can either destroy a Frostbite, destroy an Ice Affliction, or unfreeze a frozen card. So this card does a lot. It's really good into ice decks, especially Icelander, who's going to be giving you like Ice Afflictions like Frost Hex. But even against decks that are just giving you a few Frostbites, it could make the difference in your pitch math if you are able to destroy one of those Frostbites. If you want to save up multiple Thaws in your graveyard, you can banish multiple of them to destroy 2-3 Frostbites and go off on a big turn. So I think this card's going to be a big haymaker in the format. I think Draconic decks, both of them are going to have to play all 3, and it's really going to help their game into the ice decks. Because I think it's going to be so impactful in the ice matchup, I'm going to give it 5 stars, which means it's meta-defining. Meta-defining, at least in my ratings, mean that other decks are going to have to consider this card when they're building their decks. So the ice decks are going to have to consider Thaw. They're going to have to figure out what their game plan is around Thaw, and they're going to have to make sure they have an approach to still beat decks that are running Thaw. So because it's going to make ice decks have to react to it so much, I'm going to give it 5 stars for meta-defining. The Draconic decks should definitely have 3 copies of these. Next, we've got Liquify. Liquify is a Majestic as well. It also blocks for 2. It also is a red, and it costs 1 resource here. It is an attack reaction, and it has the ability Rupture. So Rupture is a new keyword. It means it has to be played at chain length 4 or higher, so you have to have a pretty wide chain length. If you were playing this, it does nothing by itself. But if it is on Rupture, so it's being played chain length 4 or higher, you get to make a target attack action gain the effect. When this hits a hero, put a -1 counter on an equipment they control. Then if it has 0 defense, destroy it. So the effect is really strong. We've seen in Flesh and Blood that destroying equipment is typically quite good, and equipment's one of the key parts of the game. So destroying equipment is really solid. Obviously, this has a lot of things it's asking of you. It's asking to be at chain length 4 or higher. It's asking the card to actually hit. So it's asking a lot of things, but I think the payoff is really good. I think decks are going to have to play around this. They're going to have to make sure that if you're playing at chain length 4 or higher, that they don't let that card hit, because you can react with Liquify. So they're going to have to make sure they block that out. They're just going to have to do a lot of stuff to play around this year. So I'm actually going to give Liquify 5 stars as well. I'm not as confident on this 5-star rating as I am on Thaw, but I do think this card is going to be pretty important to a lot of the Draconic decks trying to destroy equipment. I think they're going to at least play, maybe 2 copies and try to go wide with their chain links, hit and make Liquify destroy some equipment. So I think this card's quite strong, especially blowing up stuff like Tunic that only has 1 defense, because a lot of armor has 2 defense, right? So you can't destroy it with Liquify. But if it has 0 defense, like Storm Striders, or 1 defense like Tunic, this will be able to destroy that, and this will get a lot of value sometimes. So I think decks are going to have to make sure that they know when their opponent might be playing Liquify, and they're going to have to make sure they don't get blown out by it not blocking at chain length 4. Our next Majestic is Uprising, named after the set itself. This one blocks for 3, so a little bit better. It costs 0 and is also a red card. And this one is a non-attack action with Go Again. It says your next 4 Draconic attacks this turn have +1. So the major downside of this card is in Draconic decks is that it is not a chain link, right? Non-attack actions don't count as chain links. And for that reason, it is a little bit worse than Draconic decks, funnily enough, as it's a Draconic card that cares about Draconic attacks. But it's a little bit worse because a lot of the powerful cards, like Liquify with Rupture, wants you to have a lot of chain links. And Uprising is using a card from your hand and not adding anything to a chain link. So it's a little counterintuitive how it works. But it has a pretty good upside. It's a 0 for 4 damage if you get all 4 Draconic attacks in after it, which is a really solid rate. It's kind of a 0-cost Art of War on your next 4 attacks, giving them all +1. So I think the card's pretty good. I still think it's playable, so I'm going to give it 3 stars. I think it's playable in both Draconic decks. If you're going really wide with Dramai, Fi is always going to go wide, so it's probably a little bit more consistent in Fi. But I think Dramai might be able to use this as well. Either way, I don't think it's insane. It might not even be core to the decks. But I think it's good enough that I think this card will be playable. Next, we've got Tome of Firebrand. I think this might be our last Majestic. It's definitely at the end of them. All of the Majestics are red color strip, so this one is as well. It's just that Draconic is red color strip themed, so it makes sense. This one costs 1 resource, and it's an instant, so it doesn't block. It says, play Tome of Firebrand only if you control 4 or more Draconic chain links. So a big ask here. You have to have 4 chain links, and they have to all be Draconic, but it has a huge upside of drawing 2 cards. So this is, big value here. Drawing 2 cards for only 1 resource is really strong. It's just asking a lot of you. So I think the payoff is big enough here that it's certainly worth the cost. I think this can end up making some huge turns. And for decks like Fi, especially, that can really consistently hit 4 chain links, their Phoenix Flame gets 1 guaranteed. Their weapon is another guaranteed. You only need 2 attacks in there to hit 4 chain links. I think this card will be pretty easy to play and get some immediate value from. So I think I'm going to give this card 4 stars. I think it'll be pretty core to the Draconic decks, getting some really big turns, drawing a ton of cards, and just getting a huge swing power turn by using Tome of Firebrand here. Yep, so that was the last of the Majestics. Now we're going to be moving on to the rares. The kind of cool thing they did with this set is they made the specializations that are Draconic both for Dramai and Fi. I think the reason they did that is for draft purposes. Since they have to share the talents, they made it so that they can both use the specializations. It leaves it a little bit more open, and you can just kind of draft generally Draconic cards instead of being stuck to one of the heroes that early. Either way, we've got Red Hot here that costs 2. It's a red, and it blocks for 3. Actually, I think all of the Draconic cards that we're going to look at are red. I think all the Draconic cards are only one version of them, and they're red. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure all the cards we're looking at today are red color strip only, if that helps. So this is a 2 for 4 damage, blocks 3. It's an attack. It's a Jeremiah or Phi specialization, and it has Rupture, which means it has to be Chainlink 4 or higher. It says, when you attack with this, reveal the top X cards of your deck, where X is the number of Draconic Chainlinks you control. Deal damage equal to the number of red cards revealed this way to any target, then shuffle. So there's a lot I don't like about this card. 2 is pretty expensive in decks that are trying to use a lot of red cards. They're not going to have that much to pitch. 2 for 4 is not a good rate. It has to have 4 Chainlinks to even do anything. Otherwise, it's just a really bad 2 for 4. You could also reveal... you could just not reveal red cards and get unlucky, and then the card's really bad. Also, you have to shuffle after, which hurts pitch stacking. So there's a lot I don't like about this card. The only thing I do like is that it blocks for 3, really. I'm going to give this card just 2 stars here. I think it has some niche play, maybe. But I think, generally speaking, this card's not going to be quite good enough. The other specialization that I like a little bit more here is Rise Up. Rise Up is also a red. It's cost 1, which I like a little bit more than costing 2. It also blocks for 3, and it attacks for 3. So for 1 resource less, you're dealing 1 less damage. I think that's a great trade-off in a deck that can't pitch for very much. It also has Rupture, so if it's Chainlink 4 or higher, it has Dominate. It just has that, right? And it gets plus X power, where X is twice the number of Phoenix Flames you control. So here we're just talking about, in Classic Constructed at least, I think we're mostly just talking about Phi. I don't think Jeremiah is going to really use Phoenix Flames to the same extent that Phi does, and she's not going to be able to use them as easily. So I think in Limited, this card's good for both heroes, but I think in Classic Constructed, this is going to be mostly a Phi card. But I think it's pretty solid in Phi. You can pretty consistently get 2 Phoenix Flames at least, in which case you're getting twice that 2 and Dominate, so it's a 1 for 7, which is really good. 1 for 7 Dominate is a great rate. So with only 2 Phoenix Flames, this is a 1 for 7 Dominate. 3 Phoenix Flames make this a 1 for 9 Dominate, which is an amazing rate, obviously. So I think this is a great card. I think it's super playable. So I'm going to give it 3 stars for playable. The reason I don't give it 4 stars for core is mostly that it doesn't have Go Again. It's a great payoff card, but if you get too many cards in your Phi hand that don't have Go Again, you're going to have some trouble. So I don't think you're going to play all 3 of these probably. You don't want to draw 2 at the same time. Then you're not going to really get benefit from either one. But I think the card's a good enough payoff that it's certainly playable. Next, we've got Blaze Headlong. Blaze Headlong is a 0-cost red. It blocks for 2 and attacks for 4. And it says, if you've played another red card this turn, it has Go Again. So this is an easy 4-star, super core, really good in Phi especially. 0 for 4 is a great rate. We know that in basically every aggro deck, 0 for 4 is a great rate. 0 for 4, Go Again, even better. And this Go Again is super easy to turn on. You're a red-based deck, and you just have to play any red card before it. So just play a red card, and now you've got this amazing 0 for 4 attack with Go Again. Really strong here. Definitely love this card. So I think this will be included in Phi for sure. 3 copies, basically always. And then I think maybe Jeremiah might like this card. I'm obviously less hesitant on Jeremiah. I think Jeremiah, I would only give this 3 stars for her just because she's not looking to play these kinds of cards as much. She's mostly trying to just build up a big board of dragons. But I think she could totally play it too. I mean, a 0 for 4 is always a good rate. Next, we've got Breaking Point here at common. I'm actually pretty surprised a card with this powerful effect is at common. It is a 1-cost red. It blocks for 3, which is amazing as well. It attacks for 5, so 1 for 5 with block for 3. We're already super happy with that rate. And it has the effect Rupture, so if it's at Chainlink 4 or higher, it has when this hits a hero, destroy all cards in their arsenal. So this card is just like a chef's kiss, right? Like it's just 1 for 5, great rate. Blocks 3, great. Has a really good on hit if it's at Chainlink 4 or higher, destroying all cards in their arsenal. It's basically Command and Conquer. It's great. I mean, there's nothing bad about this card. It's great in Limited. It's great in Classic Constructed. It's great always. I'm going to give this card 4 stars. I'm not gonna. It's maybe like 4.5 actually. It's not meta defining in the sense that other decks don't really have to build around Breaking Point. It's not like they can do anything to stop it per se. I mean, they're not going to not Arsenal just because Breaking Point's in Draconic decks. But I think this card is really strong. It's a great rate, a great effect. I don't know why the Draconic decks probably wouldn't run this. Maybe Jemai wouldn't run it as much because it's harder for her to build up chain links. But even then, she might still want this card. So Fi definitely wants this card in all 3 copies. So I think this card is great. Effect's really good, rate's really good, and we're definitely going to see Breakpoint being played in Classic Constructed. Next, we've got Burn Away. Burn Away is a 0-cost red. It also blocks for 3. It only attacks for 2, so 0 for 2, not great off the bat. It says, adds an additional cost to play Burn Away, you may banish a Phoenix Flame from your graveyard. When you do, Burn Away gains +2 and go again. So if we compare this to the card like Blaze Headlong that we just looked at, Blaze Headlong is a 0 for 4, and it has go again as long as you played a red card. This is, I guess this does block for 1 more, but this is a 0 for 4 with go again, but you have to banish a Phoenix Flame from your graveyard. You're never going to get that Phoenix Flame back. This is just, it's too much. You don't really want to banish your Phoenix Flames, especially in Fi. You want to keep them in your graveyard so you can grab them with cards like your Hero ability or Inflame. I don't think we're really trying to banish our Phoenix Flames. That would just kind of negate the effect of having them in our deck and being able to get them back. So maybe this could see some play in Limited. It might be good in Jemai in Limited, but I think generally speaking, this card's asking a lot, and the downside of just being a 0 for 2 is not great. Blaze Headlong, even if it doesn't have go again, is still a 0 for 4. This one's pretty useless without its ability, so don't love Burn Away. I'm going to give this just 2 stars. Only giving it 2 stars because 0 for 4 go again is still decent, and block 3 is fine, so it might see some really niche play in Jemai, but I don't think this card's good enough. Next, we've got Flameborn Retribution here. So this is a 1 for 3 with go again. It's also red. It blocks for 2. And it says when you defend with it, if you've been dealt damage this turn, you can return a Phoenix Flame from your graveyard to your hand. So I don't really think this card's going to see play in Jemai, but I think in Fi, this card's pretty good. It basically draws a card when you block with it because you're putting your Phoenix Flame in your hand. It doesn't really cost a card. So I think this is going to be great in aggro mirrors for Fi. You'll be able to block 2 damage, either breaking a Mask of Momentum chain or stopping some on hits that you want to stop. So 2 block is pretty nice, and you'll get that Phoenix Flame back into hand still if you've taken damage this turn already, which means you didn't really use up a card. You're still going to have a Phoenix Flame in hand. Really like the effect there. So I'm going to give this 3 stars, very playable, and the worst case scenario, it's a 1 for 3 with go again, which is still very playable. I mean, people love red belittle. And then we have Flamecall Awakening. This is also a 1 for 3 with go again. It also blocks for 2. It's also a red. And it has the effect of when you attack with it, if you've played another red card this turn, you search for a Phoenix Flame from your deck, reveal it, put it into your hand, then shuffle. So this card's really core to the strategy of Fi. You're going to have 1 Phoenix Flame starting in your graveyard and 2 in your deck. But, I mean, you don't really have a lot of ways to find those from your deck. I think Flamecall Awakening might be one of the only ways. So this card's really important to Fi. You want to draw either your Phoenix Flames early or your Flamecall Awakenings to find those Phoenix Flames early. So I think Flamecall Awakening, really strong. It's going to be core to Fi's strategy, so I'm going to give it 4 stars. Very important here to how Fi is going to play. And yeah, I think Fi is going to need this card in their deck. Jemai, maybe not as much, but definitely going to be 4 stars on the scale for Fi here. Next up, we've got Inflame. I think this is another really core card to Fi. This is another way to get our Phoenix Flames back without our hero ability. So this is a 0 for 1 with go again. It's a red and it blocks for 2. And 0 for 1 with go again might seem kind of weak, but it's really a 0 for 2 with go again because you find a Phoenix Flame that will then attack for 1 with go again as well, right? You're getting a Phoenix Flame. When you attack with it, you return, let me read the effect. When you attack with Inflame, if you've played another red card this turn, you may return a Phoenix Flame from your graveyard to your hand. So you get to put a Phoenix Flame from your graveyard back in your hand as long as you played a red card, which, like I said, makes this basically a 0 for 2 with go again because the Phoenix Flame is also going to attack for 1. But if you have any kind of pump effect, like we saw, Spreading Flames is a Draconic Ninja card that gives all of your, it's going to give +1 to all of these. If you've played Uprising, the Majestic, that'll give them +1. If you play like an Art of War, activated Stubby Hammers, it'll make this be 0 for 2, and the Phoenix Flame is 0 for 2, which at that point is a 0 for 4. Sorry, my cat's hitting some stuff. Which at that point is a 0 for 4 across 2 cards, which is also important. That's building you 2 chain links here. So I'm going to give this one 4 stars. Fi definitely is running 3 copies of this. Once again, I don't think this is going to be as important for Jermai's strategy, but for Fi at least, this is going to be a definite 4 stars. Next, we've got Lava Burst. Lava Burst is a 0 for 3. It only attacks for 2, so I think we saw last time I wasn't a huge fan of these 0 for 2s. And it has Rupture. If it's played at chain link 4 or higher, it has +3 damage. So it has the payoff of being a 0 for 5 if it's chain link 4 or higher, but I think the downside of being a 0 for 2 when it's not on chain link 4 or higher, and the fact that it doesn't have Go Again means I don't think a 0 for 5 is worth it. I'd rather just play a 0 for 4 that has Go Again than this effect. I'd rather just play a 0 for 4 in general because this card will sometimes just be a 0 for 2. So because of that, I'm going to give this 3 stars for playable just because it can 0 for 5. But it's actually, this one's closer to a 2.5 star. I'm going to give it closer to 2.5 just because, you know, sometimes it's going to be a 0 for 2 and we don't like that very much. We have found in our testing that sometimes a 0 for 5 is good enough. But I think there's better payoffs at the end of the chain link than this. So playable, but not that playable. Next, we've got Searing Touch here. This is a 1 for 3 red with Rupture, and it blocks for 3 as well. This one's Rupture is when you attack with this, deal 2 damage to any target. Once again, like we saw with Lava Burst, it being a bad rate and trying to get extra damage from Rupture, it only makes it a 1 for 5 with Rupture. You compare this to Breaking Point, that's always a 1 for 5 with an extra effect from Rupture. It's just obviously worse. This card's only 2 stars, maybe niche play. The fact that when you attack with this, it deals 2 damage to any target means you could kill some dragons with it maybe. So if you need to kill some allies, maybe as more allies get printed, this could see play. But right now, I'm just going to give it 2 stars. I think it's pretty niche. And then I think last, I could be wrong, but I think this is our last card, is Stoke the Flames here. This is a 1 for 4 that blocks for 3. It's a red. And when it hits, you may return a Phoenix Flame from your graveyard to your hand. If you do, it gains Go Again. So it may seem nice as a 1 for 4 with Go Again that gives you a Phoenix Flame back, but it has to hit. So if you don't have an attack reaction and your opponent just blocks this out, it loses Go Again, it loses the effect, and it's kind of then just a 1 for 4 with no Go Again, a little useless. I think this card just has too much of a fail state. You don't want to be playing just 1 for 4s that don't have Go Again, that don't have an on-hit effect. I think this has too much fail state potential, and it could just end your turn if it doesn't hit. So for that, I'm just going to give it 1 star. This one's also a little closer to 2 stars, so I think this one maybe some have some niche cases against decks that can't block well, but I think mostly this card is not playable. We just don't want to be throwing out 1 for 4s without Go Again. And yeah, that is the last card here. So thank you guys for watching. Remember to like, subscribe, comment. I appreciate all the support. I'm going to keep trying to pump these out. I think next we have Icelander or some of the ice cards. I think we're all done with Draconic here. And then after that, at the end, we have generics. If you want to see some more in-depth analysis, make sure to check out the Patreon. And once again, I'll see you guys next time.